This disaster didn't happen by accident. It was ingeniously crafted by gossip and blood. And the truth behind the man you call a hero is far uglier, sadder, and dirtier than Hollywood would ever dare project on a movie screen. If you still believe Wild Bill Hickok was the fearless knight of the West, the white hat champion of justice who never missed a target, sorry to tell you, but you've already lost the fight before even drawing your gun. Everyone blames the outlaws for the violence of that era, but the truth is that the greatest danger to peace often wore a silver star on his chest and carried a bottle of whiskey in his hand. Wild Bill wasn't a symbol of order. He was a broken man, an adrenaline and gambling addict who made the dumbest, most amateur mistake in frontier history. And the worst part? He knew the end was coming, and it gets darker and strangely more human.
Imagine waking up in a world where the concept of tomorrow is a luxury few can afford. We're in Deadwood, 1876. Forget the clean streets and choreographed duels. Picture mud up to your knees mixed with horse manure, the smell of human sweat from thousands of miners who haven't seen soap in months, and the constant sound of pickaxes hitting rock, all wrapped in a chorus of shouts from saloons that never close. Money there wasn't paper, it was gold dust, and it evaporated from men's hands like it held a personal grudge against each one. Laws were abstract suggestions, and the only thing separating civilization from total slaughter was the reputation of men like James Butler Hickok. Even sheriffs and marshals were in constant panic, which is rare because usually they're too busy deciding which bribe to take first. But in Deadwood, fear was the only oxygen available.
The official story, the one those dime novels, the cheap comics of the time sold like hotcakes, painted Wild Bill as the prince of pistoliers. They said he cleaned up Abilene single-handedly, faced hordes of bandits without hesitation, and his aim was a divine gift. The narrative was perfect. The tall man with long hair, master of the duel, the impeccable avenger. They wanted you to believe every bullet fired by Hickok was an act of poetic justice. They created the myth of the stoic hero who brought peace where chaos reigned. But that's just the sanitized version, the one New York editors crafted to sell paper to boys who'd never smelled gunpowder. They wanted him to be an icon, but forgot to mention that behind the studio photo poses, there was a man who couldn't sleep without a gun in hand and one eye open. The psychological tension was a rope stretched to its limit, and the public had no idea the rope was already fraying. Because here's the part they never mention in basic history documentaries. This is where the shine on the sheriff's stars starts to oxidize and reveal the rust underneath.
Wild Bill Hickok's big secret wasn't a common character flaw, but an event that shattered his soul. In 1871, while trying to control a mob in Abilene, Bill drew his famous ivory-handled Colt 1851s. The air was thick with smoke and shouts. In the chaos, he saw a figure running toward him with a gun in hand. Pure instinct, years of training, Bill fired 2 dead-on shots, as always. But when the smoke cleared, the outlaw on the ground was Mike Williams. Mike wasn't a bandit. He was Bill's deputy, his best friend. The man who'd run to help him, Bill killed him because he was blinded by his own paranoia and an overly light trigger. This wasn't a workplace accident. It was proof he was a ticking time bomb. He cried while carrying Mike's body, but the damage was done. The hero was now a man who didn't even trust his own shadow. He was let go shortly after, and from then on, he was never a lawman again. He became a nomad, a professional gambler who used his fame to intimidate opponents at the poker table. It wasn't about justice, it was about survival and the desperate attempt to forget Mike Williams's face. It's like watching an elite tightrope walker who, after the first fall, spends the rest of his life trying to convince the audience the ground is crooked. But fate's irony is cruel, and the most humiliating detail of Wild Bill's life was still to be written on the face of a dirty deck of cards.
What almost no one tells you is that the world's greatest gunslinger was going blind. Glaucoma was devouring Bill's vision. Imagine the terror. Your life depends on being the first to spot the enemy's move, but the world is turning into a gray fog. In Deadwood, he was a ghost of himself. He spent hours gambling, not for pleasure, but because he didn't know how to do anything else. Greed from others surrounded him. Danger signs were on every corner, but Bill was in deep denial. He refused to admit his work tool was failing. He became an easy target. Some experts argue his trip to Deadwood wasn't a gold rush, but a search for a place to die where no one knew him as the failure from Abilene. He was surrounded by an aura of death. The sequence was obvious to anyone watching. Arrogance gave way to paranoia, which gave way to addiction, culminating in total vulnerability. It wasn't an identity crisis, it was a slow-motion execution where time itself was the executioner. We arrive at August 2, 1876. The Nuttall and Mann's saloon was noisy, but Bill was focused on his cards. For one single time, maybe from fatigue, maybe from dark fate, he broke his golden rule. He sat with his back to the door. Jack McCall, a nobody, a resentful drunk who'd lost money to Bill the day before, walked in. The world seemed to freeze. McCall didn't challenge Bill to a duel. He wasn't man enough. He simply walked up to the legendary gunslinger's neck and yelled, "Take this!" before pulling the trigger. The bullet went through Bill's head and out his cheek, hitting another player. It was quick. It was cowardly. It was the moment the gossip market stopped and Deadwood held its breath. If money could scream, the sound in that saloon would have been deafening. The myth of invincibility fell along with Hickok's body to the filthy wooden floor among spit and sawdust.
But what happened in the seconds after his body hit the ground is what should really intrigue you. It's the detail most ignore, but it's still in your pocket or on your computer today. When Bill's fingers relaxed, the cards he held fell. 2 black aces and 2 black eights. The 5th card is debated to this day, but it doesn't matter. What matters is that the dead man's hand was born there. People think the West ended when train tracks crossed the desert, but Hickok's culture of death never healed. We turned a cowardly murder into a bad luck charm and mysticism. The cost of life back then was measured in bullets, and today we still romanticize the armed man who solves everything alone. Decisions made in saloons like Deadwood's shaped the American idea of masculinity and vigilante justice. This event affects your life today every time you watch an action movie where the hero does what needs to be done above the law. Wild Bill didn't die for an ideal. He died because of a deck of cards and a door he didn't watch. His death was the birth of an industry that profits from violence while ignoring the mental scars of those who practice it. And if you think Bill's story ended with the shot, wait until you see how one eccentric woman turned his death into an eternal romance and how Western justice failed before it got it right.
Among Deadwood's shadows emerges a figure Hollywood loves to romanticize, Martha Jane Cannery, known as Calamity Jane. Picture a woman tough as old saddle leather, dressed like a man with a rifle in hand and a whiskey bottle on her belt, a scout, a stagecoach driver, a lost soul in the frontier chaos. Bill and Jane met briefly in Deadwood just weeks before his death. It wasn't love at first sight. At best, it was a superficial friendship in a sea of drunks and opportunists. Jane was known for her gun skills and helping during smallpox outbreaks, but her obsession with Bill came after his death. In her 1896 autobiography, she invented a secret marriage, shared adventures, and a divorce so he could marry another. Pure fiction. fueled by dime novels that needed a heroine to pair with the fallen hero. In Jane's mind, Bill was the perfect partner, but historians confirm there was no romance. She visited him in the saloon, perhaps out of platonic admiration, but Bill, with his failing vision and growing paranoia, saw her as just another loud figure in the bar. Years later, in 1903, dying of alcoholism, Jane asked to be buried next to him in Mount Moriah Cemetery, a request granted that sealed the legend. Think about the psychology. Jane, a woman rejected by society, used Bill's fame to build her own immortality. Emotional greed, desperation, or just the West turning tragedy into spectacle? This fake relationship is the epitome of the myth. Hollywood turned it into an epic love, but it was just dust and lies, like Deadwood's gold dust.
McCall's bullet wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a legal comedy of errors that exposes the fragility of law in the West. Jack McCall, the cowardly, crooked-nosed man, was captured immediately after the shot. In Deadwood, with no official courts since the town was illegal Indian territory, an improvised miners' court tried him the next day. Imagine the scene, a saloon transformed into a court, with jurors reeking of sweat and whiskey, deciding the fate of a man. McCall lied shamelessly, claiming that Bill had killed his brother in Kansas, a complete fabrication to appeal to sympathy. Incredibly, he was acquitted and walked away laughing while the town seethed with rage. But fate doesn't forgive liars. McCall fled to Wyoming, where a federal marshal arrested him in August 1876, recognizing that the Deadwood trial was legally invalid. Taken to Yankton, the capital of the Dakota Territory, he faced a real court in December. There, with no lies to convince him otherwise, he was convicted of premeditated murder. On March 1, 1877, McCall was hanged on a public gallows, swaying in the icy wind as the crowd watched. His last thoughts? Probably regret for not having run further. This double jeopardy illustrates the chaos. In the West, justice was what the powerful decided in the moment. For Bill, it came too late, but it reinforces the lesson. Greed and cowardice always exact their price, even if it takes time.
Wild Bill Hickok's story teaches us that the line between hero and monster is as thin as a knife's blade. The law isn't made of perfect men, but deeply flawed humans dressed in leather and metal. Money wasn't the problem in Deadwood, and neither were the guns. The problem was human behavior, the ego that keeps a man from sitting facing the door, the greed that makes a drunk seek revenge from behind, the obsession that turns acquaintances into eternal lovers, and the society that prefers the shiny legend over the bloody truth. In the end, the badge didn't protect Bill from his own blindness. Fame only put a bigger target on his back, and justice came in patchwork improvisation. Greed always wins the short game, but destroys the player in the long run. And if you think this death was the end of the madness in Deadwood, wait until you hear what the Undertaker did with Bill's body, selling strands of hair as relics, or how Jane used his grave to perpetuate the lie. But that's a story for the next video.